Hey everybody, welcome back to The Point. Apologies for being out the last 2 days, but we are back better than ever today with a lot to dive into. Believe it or not, I've been watching some NHL preseason, have a few thoughts on players that have impressed me to this point. We got the Ryder Cup starting tomorrow, Team USA versus Team Europe. There's some juice to it, Live versus the PGA, and just it's always a rivalry. Looking forward to that. We're going to talk about some UFC fights on the horizon that are awesome matchups that we'll dive into over the next couple of months before we close out 2023. We had some baseball last night. The Blue Jays shut out for back-to-back games, but yet they're still going to make the playoffs. The Orioles are closing in on winning the American League East. Ronald Acuna Jr., first player ever, 40 home runs, 70 stolen bases. Incredible feat for him. We still got a race in the NL wildcard with the Marlins. So we got lots to dive into today. But we have to start in the NBA. NBA training camps open next week. And most teams have media scheduled for Monday. And the team that everybody was going to be circling was the Milwaukee Bucks. Pardon me, not the Milwaukee Bucks. To be circling the Portland Trail Blazers. Jumped over my skis. They were circling the Portland Trail Blazers because the Portland Trail Blazers still had, at that time, Damian Lillard on their roster. Damian, obviously, multiple time, 30 points per game score over the course of multiple seasons. One of the best guards of his era. But he had been in Portland a long time. He had made a lot of money, and as we all know, this offseason he's said that he wants traded out of Portland, and his desired location was the Miami Heat. And these discussions have been ongoing since the Miami Heat lost in the NBA Finals, obviously to Denver. And going through the summer, Miami lost Gabe Vincent. They lost Max Strus. Their team got worse, if you look at it. And they looked at their situation and said, now we have to get Damian Lillard. We've been to 2 of the last 4 finals. We can beat anybody in the East. When we get to that last game, whether it's the Lakers or whether it's the Nuggets, we can't beat the best team in the West. We can't get over the hump with Jimmy Butler as our primary option and a bunch of good to average players around him. Damian wants to go to Miami. Miami wants Damian. Seems like a match made in heaven. But Portland said, well, we're not just going to trade you to Miami if we don't get the deal that we want, because this is a business. And there's reports Damian didn't handle this like James Harden, but he was using the media. Mark J. Spears, who worked for the mothership, talking about, well, I don't know if I want to play anywhere else but Miami. I don't know about training camps. If I'm in Portland, I'll show up to training camp. Anywhere else, I will not. But over the last week or so, we started to hear more and more rumblings about the situation. A Damian Lillard trade is close. A deal could be imminent. Other teams are starting to emerge. The Toronto Raptors, a surprise team. The Milwaukee Bucks are seeing what's available. And we got a deal done yesterday when Portland traded Damian Lillard to the Milwaukee Bucks. Damian Lillard joins Giannis Antetokounmpo, where Milwaukee has been an interesting team this offseason as well, as Giannis has this year and next on his current contract, and he said, if Milwaukee doesn't give me a chance to win, then I'm not going to stay in Milwaukee my entire career. It's not that important to me if I don't stay here, if I don't have a chance to win, which more power to him. But Milwaukee clearly was listening to Giannis. Clearly, they see the same thing, that they can keep a window open. They can keep asses in seats. They can keep interest level up with two of the most dynamic players in all the NBA now on one roster. An NBA champion in Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard at the age of 33, who's hoping to win his first title this upcoming season. So what did Portland get? Well, it was a 3-team deal, because this is what has to happen in the NBA because there's so much movement. Portland acquired Drew Holiday from the Milwaukee Bucks, DeAndre Ayton, the former All-Star center, first overall pick from the Phoenix Suns, who Phoenix has been trying to trade for about a year and a half. He ends up on Portland. Toumani Camara, which is a prospect, a 2029 unprotected Milwaukee first-round pick, and pick swaps in 2028 and 2030. We'll get into what Phoenix got in a minute, but I just want to focus on this side of the deal. I totally get why Milwaukee did this. I think everybody that follows basketball had the same opinion. The Milwaukee Bucks have the same roster that they did 3 years ago. Giannis, of course, to me, rate him and Jokic, two best players in the NBA. Aging Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, who isn't exactly a spring chicken, and Brook Lopez, who I love. He might have had the best year of his career last year at age 34, but he's 35 now, and he's a big in the NBA at age 35. How are his knees going to hold up? Yes, he plays the position differently, but there's a lot of worries there. And yeah, okay, we have Grayson Allen, and we have different role players that we like on this team, but the nucleus of this team has been together a while, and they did win a championship. But if Kevin Durant has Kevin Love, if Kevin Durant has Kyrie Irving, do they win? If he has James Harden, tough to say. It was Game 7 with Kevin Durant by himself. Plus, Milwaukee was the best team in the Eastern Conference last year, and they get gentlemen swept by the Miami Heat in 5 games in round number 1. So Damian Lillard makes this team more threatening. And to be completely honest, they lose Grayson Allen to Phoenix. Drew Holiday is a big loss, because Drew Holiday is a really important piece. He's one of the better on-ball defenders in the NBA, guard or even a big. I view him as one of the best. He can lock anybody up when he's on his game. And Portland has already stated that they're going to try to move him as soon as possible to a contending team. So I like it for Milwaukee because the status quo was not working. The status quo was success in the regular season and then failure in the postseason, which is exactly what you don't want. And to not give up really picks that will be that important in Giannis's career are great too. A 2029 unprotected first round pick. If Giannis Antetokounmpo is still there in 2029, he'll be at the tail end of his career, and they really probably won't be of consequence, and they might be going through a rebuild anyway. Swaps 2028 and 2030, you can deal with that. So I think for Milwaukee, it makes all the sense in the world because Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo have the same mission. They want to win. Giannis has 1, Damian has 0. Giannis has stated he doesn't want to just have one title. He wants to be a guy that has 3, 4, viewed as one of the all-time greats when his career ends. And he is great currently, But one title is one title. You need to be with, if you want to be mentioned with the LeBrons, with the Magic Johnsons, with the all-time greats, it has to be more than one. And with Dame the way he plays, I like it because Damian will shoot threes. He's a shooting guard that plays point guard, but he is a good passer. Them in the pick and roll, I imagine, will be just so dangerous. Also, Giannis just throwing high screens for Damian to pull off three-point jumpers. Absolutely. They should implement what they do in Denver with Jamal Murray and Jokic, which is a practically unstoppable play when Jamal Murray is shooting effectively. They play with each other at an all-star game. They love playing with one another. So I think the pairing will work. Both guys are not selfish. Both guys are focused on basketball, not about image or clicks or things of that nature. And Damian has already said that he's committed to Milwaukee. It was all about the Heat, but I think he looks in the mirror and says, I get to go play with Giannis. I get to go, yes, I might have to live in Milwaukee for a little while, which isn't ideal. But I have the opportunity to win a title with maybe the second best player in the NBA in an Eastern Conference that's completely wide open. It's a wide ranging of opinions. People think the Celtics got better. People think the Celtics got worse. I think the Celtics are worse than they were last year. Kristaps Porzingis already has some sort of a foot issue. Marcus Smart is gone from this team. This team isn't as tough as they were. They're not a team that you fear anymore. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, both making an absurd amount of money. And yes, the Celtics will be one of the best teams, and they may win the East. But they have their flaws. Robert Williams is going to play 60 games. He's going to be ready for the playoffs. Is he effective anymore? You bounce around the Sixers. Is it just pure harmony there? Embiid, same situation, except Giannis has a title. Embiid needs to win one. James Harden's going to come back after calling Daryl Morey a liar. They're saying he's a horrible general manager and he's not a good person and everything that he talked about him in China. He's going to come back, walk in the door, shake hands, kiss babies. Everything's all good here. Well, most people know Tyrese Maxey gets the ball less with James Harden on the team, and Tyrese Maxey's a better player right now. With the same cast of reserves, except Nick Nurse is the head coach. I don't think the Sixers are as good. They might just be the same team as they were last year. Doc Rivers, Nick Nurse, they both have one title. Same kind of resume. Miami Heat, they're not as good as they were in the postseason. Their roster got worse. They're going to need undrafted free agents and guys that they signed at minimum contracts to show up and be great like they always expect them to because they didn't land Damian Lillard. And this is a failure by Pat Riley because he tried to acquire Kevin Durant and he couldn't do it. Phoenix beat him to it. And he had all summer with all the leverage to get Damian Lillard to end up in Miami, but Portland said no. So that's where we get to this. Why did Portland say no? I understand Milwaukee. And I don't even care if Portland didn't. Actually, I do. I think it's stupid if you don't trade him to Miami out of spite. But if you're just going to flip Drew Holiday to another team, which is they said what they're going to do, and if you know that you acquire a player and you're getting ready to trade him, you are not going to get a king's ransom for Drew Holiday because teams have you over the barrel. You don't want to pay his salary. You're going to be a rebuilding team. You just had the third pick in the draft that you're going to play a ton of minutes. So you're not going to get a haul for him. My only thought is Miami's package, and in particular, if the Raptors were serious about trading for Damian Lillard, I think there are better packages than what they got from Milwaukee and Phoenix combined. Drew Holiday's off the board. DeAndre Ayton, you get rid of Yusuf Nurkic because he goes to Phoenix, and DeAndre Ayton's a better player than Nurkic, but I wouldn't want either center on my team because they're both overpaid. They both lack work ethic. They both don't have great toughness, and they both really don't have an outside shot. So what good are you to me? You get Kamara, who's a prospect, who the hell knows, and you get picks in 2029 or 2028 and 2030. You suck now. You suck now. This is your rebuild. You need to get better right away. Draft picks in 7 years, who gives a rat's ass? It's about getting them 2024, 2025, so you can start to rebuild your program. Damian Lillard kept you competitive, kept you at least relevant for the last 13 years. He played good basketball. He embodied Portland. Him and CJ McCollum got you to a conference final. LaMarcus Aldridge, those teams were solid. But you were never a title threat. To get back to relevancy, to get back to being competitive, I don't understand this. I understand the waiting game, and you want more teams to enter the conversation. You want more teams to be interested in your asset. And clearly that happened because Milwaukee ended up trading for him and the Raptors were involved. But if I can get DeAndre Ayton, or I could get Scotty Barnes, I'm going to take Scotty Barnes because I know what DeAndre Ayton is. DeAndre Ayton is a center that gets paid way too much money to provide you very little. Even OG Anunoby, I would take over DeAndre Ayton because he's a wing. He can guard multiple defenders. He has a decent outside shot. He's competitive. A lot of teams value him around the league. So if you don't want him the whole season, you can flip him at the trade deadline and get some stuff. Nobody's trading for DeAndre Ayton. The Phoenix Suns have tried to trade him for, like I said, a year and a half. And nobody would take him because the contract's too big and they don't like the player. Now, Tyler Hero and Yurtseven isn't a great deal. Tyler Hero isn't as good and isn't as bad as certain pundits make it out. If you're a fan of the Miami Heat, you overvalue Tyler Hero. You think he's better than what he is. If you're an anti-Heat person, you're not giving Tyler Hero enough credence for what he is as a player. He is a damn good three-point shooter. And he can score 20 plus points a game, and that's a good value to have on your team. And if the Heat were willing to offer draft picks in years that you think can help you, 2024, 2025 picks, I would have done that. Maybe this was a spite trade. And oddly enough, I think it gives Damian Lillard a better chance to win right away than even the Heat would. Because Giannis is better than any player on the Miami Heat. So, Portland was in a tough situation. They had a decision to make, and clearly they didn't want to bring Damian Lillard into camp. And they said, you know what? Okay, we'll flip him. We'll flip him before training camp, before media day, and we can move on with our season. We got our high-end draft pick that we're stoked about. He's going to come in, play big minutes, and be the new Damian Lillard. So you have that part of your team. Damian Lillard was only going to mess this up, was only going to take minutes away, was only going to be, for lack of a better term, a distraction. Not because of his attitude or his demeanor, but because of his placement and what he did with the ball. And you can't have two guards doing the same thing on the floor. CJ and Dame work because they're very different players. I'm happy Damian didn't handle this like James Harden or Kyrie Irving, where he holds the franchise hostage, and he's going to go to Milwaukee and he's okay with it. And at the end of the day, if we think about this, how this went down, he wanted to go to Miami because who wouldn't want to go to Miami? I want to go to Miami right now. My dream is to live in heat the rest of my life. That's all I care about. I never see snow again. That's my only dream. I understand, Dame Dollar. You want to go live in Miami? Sunshine, pools, buy a convertible. Oh, kids. Whatever you do with them. I wouldn't have kids, but that's a whole other discussion. But you're in the heat, and you're happier, and it's awesome, and the team's pretty good, and it's South Beach. And that's what he wanted to do. But we think about every situation. Harden wanted to go to Brooklyn. Didn't work out. Harden wanted to go to Houston. Didn't work out. Harden wanted to go to Philly. Hasn't worked out to this point. Kevin Durant wanted to go to Brooklyn. Definitely didn't work out. Wanted to go to Phoenix. We'll see. I don't know if it's going to work out. Sometimes the organization will send you to the best location and you don't even see it coming. You're like, oh, I don't want to go there. They traded me. But you end up on this team that helps you. Brett Favre, when he unretired for the 5th time, and then came back, wanted to play for the Vikings because he wanted to spite the Green Bay Packers because they chose Aaron Rodgers over him. And he couldn't go to Minnesota. He went to Minnesota eventually. But first he was on the Jets. And he had some success with the Jets. It wasn't the team he picked, but he went to New York, and they had some good teams, and they had some success initially. A player demanding where he wants to go. It's a concept that I can appreciate, but I think in pro sports, it's a lot like real life. I want to be in Miami. I want to live in Florida, but I'm in New Brunswick. Because that's the part of growth. Hopefully I can get there one day. But for now, I have to be here. When your career is over, in particular these NBA players and all the money they're making, they can go wherever the hell they want. They can live in Bermuda the rest of their life if they want to. For a lot of these, like a pro, like Damian Lillard, he wants to win. LeBron James played in Cleveland twice. And yes, he's from Cleveland, but that doesn't mean you have to go stay in Cleveland. But he said, you know what? This next time around, I'm going to build a team that I know that can win. Which he did with Kyrie Irving and with Kevin Love. And he went back to Cleveland because he knew, okay, I can win a championship with these pieces in this city. So why not? I'll suck it up. I'll live in Cleveland, Ohio. Because I can win a title. I think Sidney Crosby would have just stayed in Pittsburgh his whole career if they didn't have really good players with him. If they didn't have Geno, if he didn't draft Marc-Andre Fleury. Matt Murray at the time, bringing in Gensel, signing Chris Letang, Kunitz. I don't think so. Because you can say all you want, oh, I'm loyal to this place and I love it. But is what's appealing about Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? The weather, the people, the rink, the filing for bankruptcy. So I think in these trades, the team is not trying to screw the player. They're trying to benefit themselves. But unless it's a straight up hockey trade, a basketball trade, a football trade, where it's a player for a player, you are trading a guy to a team that has the opportunity to win. And in the NBA, it's even more defined because of the salary structure, the way the salary cap works. These great players need to be put together. They need to be playing on the same team. Because there's only so many slots for these big salaries. And teams are only going to pay over the salary cap, pay the luxury tax if they think you can win. So if Damian would have gone to the Toronto Raptors, they would have believed that they had a chance to win. And I'll be honest here for a second for Raptors fans. Do I think Scotty Barnes is his uber talent? No, haven't seen it yet. Siakam's very good. Anunoby's fine. But if the Raptors would have acquired Damian Lillard, I don't think they'd become a favorite to win the title. They wouldn't be better than the Lakers. They wouldn't be better than the Nuggets. Would they even be the favorites in the East? I'm not so sure. It would have been a move to say you made a big move, and I feel like Masai Ujiri and that brass, Bobby Webster, feel like they need to do something because the fans are restless. They're upset. They're angry with the trajectory of the organization. And I understand that in a sense because there's been a lot of failure. Since winning the title, having that bubble run, the Raptors have been what the Raptors were for 20 years. A franchise that nobody cares about. And that's hard to hear, but when you're the only team in the National Basketball Association that is playing in Canada, nobody gives a shit about your team because it's a pain in the ass to fly there. They don't put you on national TV because of the ratings and how that scale works. And you're just out of sight, out of mind. It's tough to grasp, and I see this from even different media people I think do the job well. They get upset about it because the Toronto Maple Leafs are such a big deal in hockey. And yeah, there's only so many Canadian teams in a league full of American teams in the NHL, but it's a completely different process. Completely different. Because in the NHL, Toronto runs things. Even though they haven't won anything in a long time, the money, the aura, the building up of that franchise has been hundreds of years in the making. While the Raptors, yeah, sure, they've been around 25 plus years now, and they won a championship. But the second Giannis Antetokounmpo leaves the Milwaukee Bucks, nobody will care about that team again. And the Raptors don't have a brand name player that you can market and say this guy is one of the top 10 players in the NBA. They just simply don't. It's not Scotty Barnes. It's not Siakam. They're good players, but they're not superstars. Portland will be in the same exact position the Raptors are now. Yes, Scoot Henderson looks fun. It'll be fun to watch. And the diehards will watch him on NBA League Pass and rave about him. But the average NBA fan won't be thinking about Portland unless Scoot Henderson can rise to the level of a Damian Lillard. Because only certain markets, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Heat, there's very few in the NBA. 76ers, to an extent, can remain relevant without having that superstar player. Think in the NHL. Toronto can. Montreal can. The Rangers can. Can Ottawa? Not really. Can Columbus? Not really. They need a Mike Babcock scandal to make them interesting. When Rick Nash left the team, were they that interesting anymore? Did people care? That weren't living in Ohio and weren't my friend Ben Murray? Not really. They were obscure. Just another organization. It would have been fun to see Damian Lillard in Canada. Sure. And now you have to compete against him in the Eastern Conference, which is not fun against a Milwaukee team that's already better than you. But I thought that would have been a trade for Masai just to say he made a deal that didn't make all that much sense because Damian didn't want to be there. And Damian can accept Milwaukee and its faults because of the Greek Freak. Because of the fact he knows there is a player waiting for me in Milwaukee that can help me accomplish something that I have not accomplished yet. A championship. The thing I grew up wanting more than anything. Even more than getting into the league, I wanted to win. And he can help me do it. I think you look at the Raptors. It's a good team, but to get Damian Lillard, what did you have to give up? If I'm the Portland Trailblazers, I would have made the deal with the Raptors. It wouldn't have been the greatest thing for Dame, but it would have been better for my organization. They did what was best for Dame in this deal, and Dame didn't even know it. Miami would have been fine. Milwaukee's better. Because Giannis Antetokounmpo is better than Jimmy Butler. And now they're in prime position to compete for the title again. And for Giannis and Dame to win their first and second respective titles. So I'm glad the deal's finally done. I'm surprised that he's in Milwaukee. But I respect the Bucks for being aggressive and getting the deal done. Let's move to Major League Baseball. Before we talk about the Blue Jays and that performance or lack thereof last night, I want to give a shout out here to Terry Francona, manager of the Cleveland Guardians, 65 years old, one of the all-time greats, Terry Francona, manager of the 2004 World Series winning Boston Red Sox. He's been around for a long time. He seems to be loved by everybody. He was honored in his last home game last night in Cleveland. He got the Cleveland then Indians to the World Series in 2016, ultimately losing to the Chicago Cubs. But Tito played in the big leagues for a long time. He's been the manager of the Guardians since 2012, so 11 years. Winning 2 World Series titles with the Red Sox. But he played for the Expos, the Cubs, the Reds, the Indians, the Brewers. Managed the Phillies, the Red Sox, and the Guardians. 2-time World Series champion. 3-time AL Manager of the Year, 2013, 2016, and 2022. He's had some health problems. But this guy's lived a great baseball life, winning multiple series with the Red Sox, ending that long drought in 2004 with that special team, coming back from 3-0 down against the New York Yankees. He was the manager for the Birmingham, I think it was called Barons, which was the team when Michael Jordan started to play Double-A baseball. Terry Francona was his manager. And he talked about he's in the Last Dance documentary. He talked about it. He said if he kept playing baseball, he would have been a hell of a player. But he goes back that far in the game that he was the manager at Double-A at that time after playing for a long time in the big leagues. He's just, when you think of baseball, you think of Terry Francona. He could easily be a Hall of Fame manager just over the course of his career and what he's accomplished. Two World Series, 3 times manager of the year. And just you don't hear a bad thing about him. You saw him and Josh Naylor, a Canadian baseball player, last night. They had a big hug. It was an emotional scene. For Naylor was clearly getting emotional just saying goodbye to Tito. And I wanted to talk about him because he's a guy you see in baseball every year, and he just looks like baseball. He's got that smile. You hear his voice, and you know it's Terry Francona. And that series in 2016 with the Cubs was special because you had 2 teams trying to end a curse. 2 teams trying to win a title so desperately for their cities. And ultimately, LeBron brought a title to Cleveland in 2016, the same year. But the last time the Guardians won a World Series was in 1948. And currently they have the longest drought between winning a World Series of any team in baseball. So it would have been special to see, but it ultimately goes to Joe Madden, who was a great manager as well with the Cubs. But just a hell of a career to Terry Francona, winning those World Series with the Red Sox, getting to another World Series with the Guardians. Just a great baseball guy. Sad to see him go, but happy that he's healthy and can hopefully has a great, remaining years. We got 4 days left in the MLB regular season. And things are still interesting. We'll talk about the NL wildcard first. Peaking at the end of their respective seasons, the Philadelphia Phillies have won 7 games in a row. They're playing great baseball. They're closing in on 90 wins. They've already clinched a playoff spot. And they're going to be the first wildcard team, and I'd be afraid to play them. Their pitching setting in. People are healthy. They are a wildcard team that made the World Series last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happened again. Same thing can be said about the Arizona Diamondbacks. Obviously not a playoff team last year, but this team has really come out of nowhere. Rookie Corbin Carroll has been a godsend, the leadoff hitter, batting .285. Christian Walker in his second Major League Baseball season, leading the team in home runs and RBIs. Zach Gallen, 17 wins on the season, has been phenomenal. But they are in the second wildcard position, have a 2-game lead over the Cubs and the Marlins. They've been playing the White Sox this week and having their way with them. We also look around, Gabriel Moreno, the catchers, had a pretty solid season for them. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. has had his up and downs. That's what he is as an MLB player. But the Diamondbacks, I think, view that trade as a success. Dalton Varsho, yes, he's a great center fielder. Yes, he can make plays, but his bat is completely went away from him this year for the Blue Jays, like the rest of their team. And the Diamondbacks have used the trades to their advantage, getting some young pieces and just having this team believe in one another that they can have success. Diamondbacks play this afternoon against the White Sox, then close out their season with a 3-gamer against the Astros. The Cubs have been a disaster this week. Have had a lead in both Tuesday and Wednesday's games going into the 8th inning, and they lost them both. Yesterday, they go to extra innings, and Acuna singles to tie the game. Then he steals second for his 70th stolen base, and Ozzie Albies, who had himself a night, brought him home. Albies finishing with 3 RBIs. The Braves are going to be the first seed. It's locked in. And yet they're still playing their hearts out, still trying to accomplish things, have 102 wins on the season now. And much to the Cubs' chagrin, the Cubs are now tied for the 3rd wildcard spot, and the Marlins have the tiebreaker. So if the Marlins and Cubs finish with the same record, the Cubs are in tough. The Marlins couldn't play Tuesday night because of a rain delay. They split with the Mets yesterday, getting crushed 11-2, then winning 4-2 in the nightcap. Cincinnati's still in the mix. They're a game and a half back, but they're in tough. They lost to the Guardians last night. They don't play today, and they finish their season. The Reds do at the St. Louis Cardinals. So we'll see if a Cinderella story can come for Cincinnati. Joey Votto was honored last weekend, which could have been his last home game as a member of the Cincinnati Reds. We'll see if they can get into the playoffs, which is looking dicey at the moment. In the American League, to think you look at the standings here, the Toronto Blue Jays are in the 2nd wildcard spot. The odds of them missing the playoffs are really, really small. Seattle's lost 4 in a row. They can't win a game right now. They're a complete mess. Houston's not much better. And yet, I think if you poll Blue Jays fans, they don't have any confidence in this team. Michael King, a couple relievers Tuesday night, and then Garrett Cole in a 9-inning gem last night shut out the Blue Jays. 18 innings, no runs scored. And the Blue Jays dropped their first 2 games to the New York Yankees, also giving up 3 home runs to Aaron Judge in that process. The swinging and misses, the strikeouts, the approach at the plate never seems to change. Garrett Cole might have wrapped up the American League Cy Young last night, which he was going to win even if he had a bad start, but he wrapped it up. But you think you could get a couple hits, start some momentum, get something going. Now, the biggest thing the Blue Jays could muster last night was get a fly out to center that might make you feel good about your at-bat. The American League is fascinating because I don't love any team. The Houston Astros have been a complete disaster over the last 2.5 weeks. And they might squeak in as a 3rd wild card, and maybe they have a good weekend and they get into the 2nd wild card position. They still have an outside chance of winning the division. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. But that's a whole mess. Their pitching's been no good. They've had some injuries. Their bats go cold, but they end up beating Seattle last night 8-3. But they also won the World Series last year, and Verlander's starting to pitch well. maybe they could catch fire and maybe they could go back. Tampa Bay, we've talked about. They're without half their team. They're without their most important players, and yet they have 97 wins. Played the Red Sox twice this week. Completely destroyed them. Taking care of business. Paredes is hitting home runs. Tyler Glasnow, Zach Eflin, both guys can pitch. I think they'll get in the wild card series. They will go game 1 and game 2 if I had to guess. But do I trust the Rays? Not necessarily. Minnesota, spare me. Minnesota seems to always make the playoffs and never win playoff games. That's their MO forever. Is this the year it changes? I don't know. They've quietly been a lot better as of late, getting to 85 wins, which is a feat for Minnesota because it looked like that might be a 500 team to win that division, but they found some success, and they've been better. Correa is starting to find his game a little bit. Their pitching is great, as I've talked about. Do I trust Minnesota going a deep run? I do not. I think they'll lose to whoever they play against. Texas, sure, but is Nate Eovaldi's arm going to hold up? Couple Tommy John's going to hold up for him. John Gray pitching the worst he's pitched all year. Max Scherzer, is he going to be available? Max Scherzer going to be able to pitch. He's out for the remainder of the regular season. That include the postseason. That's problematic. And then we have Baltimore, who I doubt at every turn, but they're a game away from having 100 wins. They beat the Red Sox tonight. They get to 100 wins after missing the playoffs last year, which is truly staggering what that team has accomplished. But I find this team so great. Gunnar Henderson was hardly an MLB player last year. Called up for a few games. He was demoted at one point because his defense wasn't good enough. And after that initial struggle, he's played 147 games this season. Basically on the field every night for Gunnar Henderson. He finishes the year, it was not done yet, but 28 home runs, 82 RBIs. Not too shabby. Austin Hayes, a very good outfielder that you don't hear about. How about 16 homers, 67 RBIs, but he plays 142 games. Santander, 150 games played, 27 homers, 92 RBIs. Nobody on this team is ultra flashy, maybe other than Adley Rutschman, who's phenomenal. What he does as a catcher when it comes to hitting, batting .276, playing in 151 games, 20 homers, 79 RBIs. Aaron Hicks has been a good find since the Yankees waived him. Cedric Mullins, always good in the outfield. But you look in their rotation, Grayson Rodriguez, Dean Kramer, Kyle Bradish. Nobody that makes you shake in your boots, but they've been doing it all year, and they're a young team, and I like Brandon Hyde's been a great manager for that group. Maybe they can catch fire. The American League, get in. Get in, because the Blue Jays could line up the rotation and go Gausman into Bassett, into Kikuchi, and maybe they could catch fire. For Houston, Verlander, Framber Valdez, you figure it out from there. Baltimore, Minnesota, Joe Ryan into Sonny Gray. They have some good pitching themselves. So there's still games to be played. There's still important moments here. But the playoffs are on the horizon. A big deal for Baltimore would be Felix Bautista, their all-star closer. He is throwing on the mound. He won't pitch in the regular season, and they're going to have extra rest because they will likely get a bye. So if they can get that bye, will he be available in a divisional series to close out games? They can go to Cano. They can go to Dean Colomb, to Yanier Cano, into Felix Bautista for the Orioles. That's a game changer. Speaking of the Cubs, that's how they won the World Series. They had a bullpen. They had a bullpen that they could turn to 7, 8, 9 that they knew were going to get outs. Their starters can only go 6. Your starter can only go 6. Our bullpen's so great, we can win. But the Marlins are at the Mets closing out the series tonight before they head to Pittsburgh to play the Pirates. They win their last remaining 4 games, they're in. Cubs finish their series against the Braves tonight, then they go to Milwaukee for 3. And Milwaukee is nothing to play for, but I'm sure they'd love to play spoiler for the Cubs. 2 teams in the same division. 2 teams that don't like one another. Diamondbacks at the White Sox this afternoon. And obviously Yankees, Blue Jays. So we'll talk about baseball more. We'll talk about playoff teams come Monday. But we'll also touch on it tomorrow, just where things stand. But all I can talk to Blue Jays fans about is I don't think the rest of the American League is that scary. Do I think the Blue Jays are a great team? No. Do I believe in the narrative that other teams around baseball are afraid to play the Toronto Blue Jays? Hell no. That's a media-driven thing or a players-driven thing. I don't buy into that. I think it's garbage, quite frankly. But whatever you need to do to psych yourself up, hey, be my guest. But I don't think anybody's walking into the Philadelphia Forum way back in the day when they were afraid to play the Broad Street Bullies. Nobody's fearing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. going 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts and a flyout to center, which has been his normal stat line this year. I don't think there's a whole lot of fear there. We got 4 more days of regular season baseball before the wild card series open up next week. Thursday night football tonight. We got a good game. Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. Divisional game, both teams 2-1. Green Bay is a 1.5 point home dog as of right now. Things to note, Christian Watson is expected to make his season debut tonight, the Packers' best wide receiver. It's also, just as we were recording this, Aaron Jones is expected to play tonight, so he's returning to the lineup. He'll have A.J. Dillon and him, two-headed monster. Thing for Green Bay, their offensive line is banged up. Elton Jenkins, David Bakhtiari, their 2 tackles, will not play. That's a problem in particular because you have Aiden Hutchinson, who's been a monster in the first 3 weeks. Jair Alexander, the top corner for the Green Bay, is questionable. The thing about playing Detroit so tough is they line up receivers in the slot. They move them around so much in that offense. So you might go, well, it's Armand St. Brown against Jair Alexander. Well, not necessarily, just the way that they craft everything. So that might not be as important. Detroit's been very good, top 10 in the NFL at stopping the run so far this year, with the rookies Jack Campbell out of Iowa and Brian Branch from Alabama playing extremely well in that method. Jared Goff has thrown an interception in back-to-back games, so that's something to note as well. This is really the measuring stick game for the Detroit Lions. People think they're a great team. People predicted they would win the division. They beat Green Bay in Green Bay last year, the last week of the season, to knock Green Bay out of the postseason, which ended up being Aaron Rodgers' last game for the Packers. Well, do it again. This is a bigger moment. You were eliminated for playoff contention when that game took place. And yes, it was a moral victory and you were happy about it. But you want to put yourself in position? Get to 3-1, have sole possession of first place, and just send a message to the rest of the division, to the rest of the NFL, that we're one of the best teams in the NFC. When we have all our tools together. I like the Packers. I've talked about it. I like Jordan Love. The comeback that they had against New Orleans, 17 down, then winning 18-17, was something pretty crazy. I'm looking forward to watching the tight ends in this game. Luke Musgrave, rookie, out of Oregon State. You got Sam Laporta, rookie out of Iowa. Both are number 1 and number 2, respectively, in receiving yards by rookie tight ends. Both are really good in college. Both are really good in the NFL. Both teams have decent running games. David Montgomery might return tonight for Detroit as well. So you'd have Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery against Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. If Elton Jenkins and David Bakhtiari were playing, I would take Green Bay tonight. I would take Green Bay because I trust in Jordan Love enough and the way that offense played down the stretch, getting Christian Watson involved, having Romeo Doubs, and your plethora of weapons is interesting. I don't think I think both these teams are very close. And Detroit as a road favorite is interesting because they're never a favorite. They haven't been a favorite in a long time, and when they are, they seem to screw it up. Looking back, they were a massive favorite against Seattle, and Seattle ended up beating them in overtime. They went into last week's game against Atlanta. They were a favorite as well. I'm going to double check this line before we talk about it, just to break it down. Because with these Aaron Jones playing, things might change. But no, the number's still 1.5. Lambeau's a tough place to play. It'll be energetic tonight. Gotta think Wisconsin's happy getting Damian Lillard. But if you're betting tonight, I think the pick is to take the Detroit Lions. It's the smart money, I would say, to take Detroit. Green Bay's still trying to find themselves. Jordan Love's still trying to figure out the quarterback position, figure out the NFL. I think Detroit has done that the last couple of years with Jared Goff, figuring out the offense, having the same offensive coordinator, go through these different things. And Green Bay took a big step last week in defeating New Orleans in a game that you didn't score a point in the first half and you look like a complete disaster. You found a way to win that game, which is a step in the right direction, learning what it's like in the NFL. But I think Detroit's just a bit ahead right now. Maybe Green Bay gets Detroit back later in the season and they punch them in the mouth back to get a win. But the play is to take Detroit minus 1.5 tonight. Other NFL news. Rich Cimini, who's a reporter in New York who covers the Jets, came out and has been talking about the locker room. He said defensive players are getting frustrated with Robert Saleh, that Zach Wilson is still the starting quarterback, that he defends him at every press conference, and they're not doing anything to try to improve the team. Well, the organization must have heard the players because they went out and signed Trevor Siemian, former Bears, former Broncos, 7th round draft pick quarterback out of Northwestern, to the practice squad yesterday. He's practicing with the team, so now the Jets have Trevor Siemian, Zach Wilson, and Tim Boyle on the active roster. Trevor Siemian is not a threat. Trevor Siemian was once a starting quarterback in Denver. It did not work out. One of the many quarterbacks that did not work out during the John Elway era. Chad Kelly, who's now a great quarterback and the CFL, was there. They went through about 4 or 5 guys before they got to Peyton Manning and said, you know what, let's just go get Peyton. And they found their brain. Trevor Seaman was with the Bengals in training camp and ultimately was cut. If you're going to sign a guy to the practice squad, I don't understand why it's not Carson Wentz. I'm not the biggest Carson Wentz fan, but he's better than Trevor Siemian. He's better than Zach Wilson. And he gives you a better chance to win, in my opinion. The Jets are playing Kansas City this week. That's going to be a gong show. But the following week, you have Denver. And the way Denver's been playing, that is absolutely a winnable game. Absolutely a winnable game because they have the worst defense in the NFL. Even with Zach Wilson, who knows? But to me, it's clear they're going to give up on Zach Wilson after this year. They're not going to keep Zach Wilson on the roster again so that Aaron Rodgers can mentor him. I don't see that happening. With a 40-year-old, you can't return it with your backup being a Zach Wilson. It just can't happen if you're the Jets. So, while knowing this, why not try to win now? Why not try to have a productive season, have some momentum, make the playoffs, then Aaron can return next year and you see what happens. Carson Wentz, it's 1 year. You don't have to stick with him. Once the year's done, he's gone. He's back to hunting, fishing, loving every day, and doing whatever the hell else he wants to do. But the dude can at least play a little bit. He can keep it competitive. He makes stupid mistakes, but Trevor Siemian is like having Zach Wilson. They have 3 Zach Wilsons on this active roster. The only difference is Zach Wilson can run. Siemian and Tim Boyle cannot. They don't use their legs, which is a problem because the New York Jets offensive line sucks. And Dwayne Brown, who is 38, is now on the IR, so he's gone for 4 weeks. So a bad offensive line and Dwayne Brown, not a good tackle, he's out. So now you have his replacement coming in to play the Kansas City Chiefs. Sounds fun. Sounds like a fun deal for the New York Jets. The team revolted last year. And they put in Mike White. And oddly enough, if the team revolts this year, there's no option because Mike White is better than Trevor Siemian. Mike White is better than Tim Boyle. The Dolphins went and scooped him up. The Jets went and paid money to get Aaron Rodgers to come over. And they didn't want to put assets into a backup quarterback because they go, we have Zach Wilson here and everything's going to go well. Aaron Rodgers is not going to get hurt after 4 snaps. We don't worry about that. We'll worry about that when it happens. Well, it's here. And is it all Zach Wilson's fault? No. The offensive line sucks and the defense wasn't as good maybe as you thought it was. But he's a part of it. He has zero confidence. He looks like a little boy back there ready to get hit by big men. And he's just not prepared for the moment. And their thing is, well, okay. We're going to stick with Zach because he was our 2nd overall pick. And we can't give up on him. Garrett Wilson doesn't want him throwing balls to him. Sauce Gardner doesn't want him on the field as a defense. These players are fed up. Quinnen Williams doesn't want to see it. Okay, we give up 15 points to the Patriots. 15 points. We battle our asses off. We blocked a field goal. We got into lanes. We tackled well. And you could only put up 10. You could only put up 10 points for an entire game. I don't give a shit if it's raining. You got to put up more than 10. We kept the opponents to 15, and you could only put up 10. Simply not good enough. So, yeah, okay, you can sign Trevor Siemian, and it's a report from Schefter. It's out on Twitter. The Jets have a new quarterback in the room, yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, it's a whole lot of nothing. It's a whole lot of no substance. All steak, no sizzle. But congrats to the Jets. And I'm sorry again to the Jets fans. UFC. UFC's off this weekend for the first time since May, which that's a hell of a run. Every weekend, another show. They'll return next weekend at the Apex. But this week we've gotten a lot of fight announcements from Dana White for the remainder of 2023. UFC 295, which is in New York City, featured by Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. They had a fun lightweight title fight. Matt Frevola, who's from the New Jersey area, coming off a big knockout win over Drew Dober, will be fighting Benoit Saint-Denis, who was on a tear himself. He just won in France, in his home country. He fought on the July 1st Sean Strickland card as well. He's won his last 4 fights via finish. He's one of the most lethal guys in the division. So you get Frevola, the striker, Benoit Saint-Denis, who will do whatever. This is an awesome matchmaking, awesome booking for these two guys. Frevola is very popular. He's trained with Aljamain Sterling, with some of these guys. And I love Frevola. And Saint Denis is one of the funnest. He's just a lethal fighter. He tries to hurt you in the cage. He wants to finish every time he gets in there. Frevola's got some of the strongest hands. A fun lightweight fight. We move to December 2nd card, which is sounding like it's going to be in Minnesota. Some big fights here. First one, Jared Cannonier versus Roman Dualice. Cannonier's last fight was against Marvin Vettori. He beat him via unanimous decision, winning really, you could argue, all 5 rounds. One of those most impressive outings in his long UFC career. Cannonier was on Ariel Helwani's shows last week, said he wanted to fight Sean Strickland for the belt because he actually beat Sean Strickland last December. But they booked him against Roman. He was never good. He got a title shot against Adesanya in July of 21. Yeah, July 21. So that was his title opportunity. It didn't work out for him. And he's been winning fights since then. He's beaten Sean Strickland, the current champion, beaten Marvin Vettori, multiple-time number 1 contender. Now he gets Roman Dualice. Dualice was on a run until he lost to Vettori back in March. He was scheduled to fight Derek Brunson in New York, but that got removed from the card because Derek Brunson was released by the UFC. It looks like he's going to be boxing in the near future. So they haven't said it's going to be the main event of this card yet, but it's a big middleweight fight, big opportunity for Dualice, in my opinion, to rise up the rankings, be in the mix. Who Sean Strickland fights next, still undetermined. I'd be surprised if it's not Adesanya, but it won't be Jared. It could still be Dricus du Plessis, who's been looking for it. I think that fight would sell. They have a lot of options at middleweight that would make for interesting fights. There's still Robert Whittaker, who's kind of hanging in the balance. Doesn't look like he's going to have a fight for the remainder of 2023. But we'll wait and see on that. But this is a fun middleweight tilt. At 170 pounds, Kelvin Gastelum was supposed to fight at Noche UFC against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Well, he had to pull out because he broke a rib. But he's healthy. He's back training again. And he is going to be making his 170-pound debut, moving down from middleweight to fight Sean Brady, who last fought in Abu Dhabi October of 2022. So obviously we're going to have the Abu Dhabi card in 3 weeks. Well, Sean Brady, it'll be over a year from him. He's gotten married. He had a surgery. He lost to Bilal Muhammad via knockout in the 2nd round. and he'll look to get back in the winning ways. It's his only professional loss. The dude's a stud. Calvin Gaslam's a warrior in there. He gets in there. He wants firefights. He wants to punch you. His fight is against Israel Adesanya, one of the funnest fights of Izzy's career. He nearly beat Izzy in that contest. He has recently beat Chris Curtis at 185 pounds. So a good one for Brady, who has not fought in over a year. He was scheduled to fight Jack Della Maddalena. I'd still love for that fight to happen at some point. Two surging contenders. At 170 pounds, you have Ian Gary, Shavkat. You get Sean Brady, JDM. These guys can all fight. They're all surging guys. I like this booking as well. At bantamweight, Rob Font and Davison Figueiredo. Another interesting one here. Rob Font at 135 pounds has been there a long time. Recently got smoked by Corey Sandhagen in a bout. But he's fought the best of the best. He's been in title opportunities. He's been at the precipice of being a champion. But he's had his pitfalls. Now, he sits in a gatekeeper role because he's welcoming Davison Figueiredo to 135 pounds. Figueiredo, obviously a former two-time flyweight champion. Last fought in January against Brandon Moreno, ultimately coming up short in that fight. So Figueiredo goes from 125 to 135. He always looked like a 135er to me because he was such a huge flyweight. The amount of weight he had to cut seemed to affect him in every fight. And now he gets to take his chances against Rob Font. Both these guys like to strike. Both these guys would like to finish each other punching. If we think back to the Moreno-Figueiredo awesome quadrilogy, they were mostly spent on the feet. Wasn't a whole lot of grappling. Wasn't a whole lot of, Moreno won one fight via rear naked choke, but it wasn't because he was trying to shoot for a takedown. Figueiredo's going to punch you. Rob Font just had a wrestling match with Corey Sandhagen that he lost in a very bad way. So I think we'll see a firefight here. Good fight. Also on this December 2nd card. This card's going to be awesome. Khalil Roundtree Jr. against Aramzat Murskanov. Khalil Roundtree is on a run. Knocked out Chris Daukaus in his last fight in the first round. Looks like a guy that has some of the best power in the division. He's just been knocking people out, and he's fighting this new man in Murskanov who's recently new to the division, recently new to the UFC, hasn't lost a fight. Last fight he beat Jacoby, has beaten Devin Clark. So you start to see him fight some ranked guys and get by them. They are 11th and 12th in the division, respectively. Roundtree said he wanted a 5-round fight after his last win. Maybe he'll get one if he can win here. The two guys that are trying to prove something, two guys trying to break into the top 10. Where you look at light heavyweight, Ryan Span's been there a long time. Ozdemir at 9, he's been in the division a long time. Anthony Smith's been there a long time. Krylov's been there a long time. But again, two guys that like to hit each other, that like to punch. December 2nd in Minnesota looks like a very fun event. December 9th event, going to be in Shanghai, which I hope we hear the announcement that we're going to get the Zhang Weili and Yang Shannan fighting for her title, because you have two Chinese fighters in Shanghai. That would be awesome. I think the UFC has to do it. As of now, they're booking the main event for this event to be Song Yadong and Petr Yan at 135 pounds. Petr Yan, obviously a former two-time bantamweight champion, has been on a bit of a skid. Losses to Merab Davishvili, losses to Sean O'Malley, losses to Aljamain Sterling twice, and he's trying to get back in the mix. And now he gets Song Yadong, who was scheduled to fight earlier in the year, but had to withdraw due to injury. So really for Yadong, this is a big opportunity for him. He fought Ricky Simone, beat him in the 5th round earlier this year. He lost to Sandhagen, beat Marlon Moraes. He's had a very good run as of late in the bantamweight division. But Petr Yan, he's 5th ranked. But you think about his last couple fights. He's fought the best of the best. He's gone against some killers. His fight against Sean O'Malley could have went either way. You could make an argument he won that fight. The first Sterling fight, illegal knee, all that nonsense. The second fight was close that he almost won. So he's been right there. He's still one of the best in the division, if you ask me. Yadong at 7, Petr Yan at 5. Winner obviously gets a lot of momentum. So a fun booking there as well. Love it. I do hope it's the co-main event and we get Yang Shannon and Zhang Weili, but maybe we won't. But I can't see them not doing that in China. And then there's finally UFC 296, the last pay-per-view of the year in Las Vegas, Nevada. 3 fights announced. Obviously, we talked last week. Colby Covington, Leon Edwards in the main event. Co-main event, flyweight title fight, Brandon Royval and Alexander Pantoja in a rematch. So we had the main event, the co-main event. We have 3 other fights added. The huge one at 170 pounds, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, former interim champion, taking on the undefeated, the killer that nobody wants to fight, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Wonderboy has stated he's going to be paid double to take this fight. He wanted to fight Kamaru Usman, but the UFC already have something planned for Kamaru, which I think can only mean Bilal Muhammad, which I don't understand why Bilal is taking that fight, but we'll get to that in another day. Wonderboy could not get Usman, who is number 1 in the rankings, so he fights Shavkat, who's undefeated, and if he can beat Shavkat at age 40, I think it's going to give him the title fight because nobody in this division wants to fight Shavkat. Nobody wants anything to do with him. He's been a menace, a great striker, and it's been tough for him to book fights because, like I said, it's just nobody wants to get in there with him. Nobody wants to deal with him. He's 6th in the rankings. He's 17-0 in his career. He had a great fight with Jeff Neal. He was scheduled to fight Jeff Neal. He had a great fight with Neil Magny. Magny hung in there with him. Defeated Charleston Harris. He's beaten a lot of guys via first-round finish. That Magny fight, you saw some holes in his game where he took too many chances. I wouldn't want to do that against Wonderboy because Wonderboy's been the best striker in the welterweight division for a long time. Wonderboy has not fought since December of last year when he beat Kevin Holland in that 5-round fight. Before that, he had lost to Bilal Muhammad, lost to Gilbert Burns. 2 guys that like to take the fight to the ground. In this one, I don't think we'll see that. I think we'll see 2 guys that want to square up and fight one another on the feet. And this is a calculated risk for Wonderboy. Because he's 40 years old, you're fighting the most feared guy at the 170-pound division, and it's all risk. It's a lot of risk. But it's also if you can beat him, I think it's the biggest reward because I think he will jump the line. He would jump Usman. He would jump even Bilal Muhammad. He would jump anybody. Because you go out and beat that guy, the undefeated king, everybody's looking at as the next champion, you deserve that. I don't think he'll win, but it's interesting for him taking it. Another 170-pound fight. Ian Machado Gary, another guy, undefeated, having a great year in the UFC, one of the biggest stars in MMA, and fighting Vicente Luque, who returned last month against winning his 5-round fight against, who did he fight? Drawing a blank. I know it's a former champion. It really doesn't matter, but it bothers me, so I have to get it right. Rafael Dos Anjos is who he's fought, winning via 5th-round unanimous decision. So Ian Gary against Vicente Luque, two guys who used to train together at Killcliff FC in Florida. They'll now be working out of separate gyms for this fight. They have all the respect for one another, they said. I'm a little surprised by this. The reason I say that is I thought Ian Gary was going to get a guy with a higher ranking, but I think this is clearly the UFC kind of delaying him a little bit. He gets a guy with a higher ranking. He's 11. He's fighting Vicente Luque, who's 10. They could have given him Sean Brady. They could have given him Wonder Boy, of course. They could have given him Rachmanov. Gilbert Burns potentially could be available at the end of the year. So there were options for him. But they're going with Vicente Luque. He would get to number 10 by the end of the year. Then you book a big fight for him, potentially in Dublin in 2024, which would send the rocket ship. And it wouldn't surprise me if Ian Gary's champion at 170 pounds by the end of 2024 because he is that good. Luque's an interesting style. I think this is a test for Ian Gary to see how good his wrestling is, his grappling skills. Because Luque is going to want to take him to the ground. He's want to get in the clinch, control dirty boxing, and not let Ian Gary punch at range and land those nasty leg kicks. We'll see if he can do it in this fight. And the last fight announced, Paddy Pimblett's returning after having ankle surgery, winning on the December pay-per-view card last year. He will finally make his return against the veteran, the legend, Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, who's on a long skid, losing to Bobby Green in Utah, that nasty head kick knockout against Michael Chandler, lost to Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje. Tony Ferguson, it looks like Tony Ferguson should retire. Dana White has acknowledged this. Tony Ferguson's 39. He's been through a lot of wars. I believe the streak's 7 in a row. Lost to Bobby Green, lost to Nate Diaz, lost to Chandler, lost to Beneil Dariush, lost to Charles Oliveira, and lost to Justin Gaethje. He's not won a fight since 2019 against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I don't think this is an unwinnable fight for Tony Ferguson because Paddy Pimblett is not that good. People saw this and said, oh, it's a murderer booking for Tony Ferguson. No, Paddy just has the aura of being a great fighter, but he isn't. He lost to Jared Gordon a year ago, but the judges bailed his ass out. Then he went to have surgery and people forgot about him and just how average he was. Tony Ferguson looked really good in the Michael Chandler fight until he got caught. He was solid in the Diaz fight. Diaz just got the better of him. The Bobby Green fight was his worst of those three. Do I think he can handle Paddy Pimblett? Do I think that fight will be competitive? I do. I think he can win it, quite frankly. He can strike with him, keep him from taking him to the ground. He absolutely has a chance. It's Tony Ferguson. He will be game. Those are the big fights in MMA. We also got boxing this weekend. No MMA, but we got boxing. We also got a Bellator card in early October, which is stacked with 4 title fights before they sell the company. But when you can get boxing this weekend and there's no MMA, and it's actually a real fight, Canelo Alvarez to me, the second best boxer on the planet behind Tyson Fury. He's fighting Jermell Charlo. His opponent says he wants to be great. Charlo's 35-1-1 with 19 knockouts in his career. So, moving up a couple weight classes to get his opportunity to fight him. Canelo Alvarez, obviously, he's so talented with his skills and just everything he can do. He's 33 as well. And he wants the fight to redeem himself. He's 59-2 over the course of his career, which is crazy. But in May of 2022, he fought Dimitri Bivol, and he lost via decision. And he moved up in weight to do it, and it didn't work out. Since then, he beat Gennady Golovkin, who he's fought 3 times, winning all 3. Then defeated John Ryder in May of 2023, and now he gets Jermell Charlo. I think he deserves to fight Dimitri Bivol at some point. He said he wants to avenge that loss. His only other loss is to Floyd Mayweather Jr., which is pretty crazy. I mean, he's beaten a lot of great fighters. Gennady Golovkin's no slouch. Callum Smith, really good fighter. Beating Caleb Plant via KO, and I like Caleb a lot. I think Sweet Hands is awesome. So I hope for Canelo that he gets this fight. I think he'll likely win it, and I hope he gets that rematch because he deserves it. It's been a minute, so it's not an immediate rematch. He's gone through different fighters. He'll move up to that weight class again. Bivol's a good fighter, don't get me wrong. That's why he beat him, because he was bigger than him and he couldn't deal with that size. But he's gone through some damn good. As a light heavyweight, he's done his thing there. But that's this weekend, which I look forward to watching that. NHL training camps, not much. Michael Backlund signed a 2-year, $4.5 million extension with the Flames yesterday. Became team captain, which I think is a good choice. He's been there a long time. Looks like he's going to spend his entire career in Calgary. Reportedly, his teammates wanted him to be captain, which is even a better endorsement that your peers wanted you to take over the position. So good on Michael Backlund. Good player. Perfect third-line center. Works really hard, kind of like the Adam Lowry decision in Winnipeg. And $4.5 million. Good little deal for him. Watching some preseason games. Matthew Joseph, who might be traded this week because the Sens have to bring in Shane Pinto, and they only have $121,000 in cap space, so somebody's going to have to go. I think he put on a show for teams last night. He played fantastic. I don't know if you saw any of that Montreal-Ottawa game, and I don't blame you if you didn't. But he finished the game with 2 goals. He was great on the penalty kill. He was tenacious. I thought he was the best player on the ice. Maybe other than Cole Caulfield, because Caulfield was really good last night as well. But he played 21 minutes. He looked engaged. He looked ready. And he was either trying to prove to Ottawa, keep me on this team, or telling other teams, I'm worth the risk. Trade for me. Give me a bigger role. He was great. I think for the Toronto Maple Leafs, watching them a bit, Noah Gregor, who's on a PTO, I think he's going to make the team. I think he should play on their 3rd, 4th line. The energy he brings, the speed, even with his size, not being a huge guy, he has the tenacity. I like Noah Gregor. Luca Cormier's looked good for the Golden Knights. He's been giving a little bit of an opportunity. Tough to crack the team, I'd imagine. But he's been solid. You still look around. Pinto, RFA unsigned. Jamie Drysdale, RFA unsigned. And Trevor Zegras, RFA unsigned. So 2 for Anaheim, 1 in Ottawa. We got about a week and a half before the start of the regular season. I'm sure some of these guys would like to get a preseason game in. So the pressure's on for these teams to get something done with their respective players. And there's also way too many preseason games. That's another gripe, but that's. And Easton Cowan, I know it's a big talk in Toronto. He's looked good. He's looked good for the Leafs. I don't think he's not going to make the team. I don't think he should make the team, but he's looked good as an 18-year-old coming into his first camp. He looks comfortable. He looks confident. A lot of junior kids sent back yesterday, sent back to their respective teams as 18-year-olds. He stays. That tells you something about where he stands in the organization. We'll see how it goes over the next week or so. Tomorrow, we got Betting Friday. We're going to talk NFL, talk about every game, go through it all, injury reports, preview the college football slate. We're going to talk about the Ryder Cup because I didn't get to do that today. We'll talk about the Ryder Cup this upcoming weekend in Rome. So that's upcoming. We'll preview the baseball weekend with only 3 games left after today. So have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll talk to you tomorrow. This to the point.